Have you ever felt like your soul was screaming, but your mouth stayed silent because you didn't have the right words to survive? Not to succeed, not to impress, but simply to exist without feeling useless. When you're sick in a foreign country, even breathing feels borrowed, and every sentence becomes a battlefield you lose before speaking. If you're tired, broken, or quietly disappearing from your English journey, this story might be the hand you needed but never asked for. Opening fear hook. Some people think the scariest thing about learning English is grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation. But let me tell you something darker. The real terror is when life throws you into a moment where words become oxygen, and you suddenly realize you can't breathe. Picture this. Cold hospital lights, the quiet hum of machines, and you lying there wondering whether you're weak, unlucky, or just stupid for not mastering English sooner. Your mind whispers, "What if English could save me?" And I just never took it seriously until my body started breaking. It sounds dramatic, but the brain doesn't care about grammar when fear hijacks the nervous system. It cares about survival, and survival needs language. When you try to speak and nothing comes out, the shame burns hotter than fever. Research in cognitive psychology calls it linguistic paralysis under threat. When stress chemicals freeze your speech center, like someone unplugged your voice from your brain. And your brain, being the toxic little comedian it is, starts replaying every moment you postponed learning. Tomorrow, next week, someday. Suddenly those excuses turn into knives with your own fingerprints on them. Because in that moment, it's not just English you're missing. It's dignity, independence, and the ability to protect yourself. You know what hurts more? The loneliness of being surrounded by people who want to help you but don't speak your language. Feels like drowning while others watch, powerless because you can't articulate where it hurts. In psychology, that's called social isolation and communication breakdown, and it's just as harmful as physical illness. Humans don't just survive on medicine, we survive on connection. And without language, especially in a foreign country, you become a silent ghost inside your own life story. Maybe you know this feeling. Wanting to cry but holding it back because even crying feels like something you have to explain in English. There's a special kind of pain when your body hurts and your words fail. It's like suffering in two languages but healing in none. This video is not about motivational cliches, perfect accents, or learning 1,000 words in a week. This is about learning to speak to survive, to love, to be understood, and to never disappear again, even when life is at its darkest. The sickness moment. Let me take you back to the exact night everything changed. It was winter in Denmark, the kind of winter that doesn't just touch your skin. It climbs into your bones like it's trying to rearrange who you are. I remember waking up with a fever that felt like fire trapped under ice. My throat was burning, my body was shaking, and suddenly even swallowing felt like a negotiation with death. Outside the window, the snow looked peaceful, but inside my room, I was learning a painful truth. Silence is loudest when you need help. You always imagine that if something bad happens, you'll magically become fluent, confident, smart. But fear doesn't upgrade your English. It deletes it. When I reached for my phone, my hands felt like they were made of glass. I tried to search for symptoms, hospital info, and emergency hotline, but everything was in Danish or English, and my brain refused to translate. It's terrifying when technology understands the world better than you do. 1 point. I tried to speak a simple sentence. I think I need help. But what came out was broken, slow, and embarrassing, like my mouth was still buffering. And at that moment, I realized something scientists call cognitive overload under physiological stress. Your brain prioritizes survival over language, shutting down anything that isn't immediately necessary. So while my body was asking, "Am I okay?" my brain was whispering, "You don't have enough English to survive this." The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. I grabbed water and it slipped from my shaking hands, hitting the floor like a cruel joke. I remember staring at the spilled water thinking, if I can't even communicate my pain, does it even exist? That's the psychological trap of living abroad. Pain becomes a private language no one else can read. I opened Google Translate, but even that betrayed me when I couldn't describe my symptoms accurately. Words like tight chest, sharp pain, pressure behind my eyes, suddenly felt like medical poetry instead of survival vocabulary. And that's when the fear changed shape. It wasn't just about sickness anymore. It was about disappearing unnoticed. Scientists say that uncertainty activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, meaning confusion can literally hurt you. And I was experiencing both at the same time. My body needed help, but my English wasn't strong enough to guide me through it. In that moment, it didn't matter how many grammar rules I memorized, survival needed clarity, not correctness. No1 prepares you for the moment when learning English shifts from being a goal to being a lifeline. Love versus isolation. Here's the part no one warns you about. Sickness doesn't just attack your body. It exposes every fragile corner of your relationships, especially when love has to travel through a foreign language. I was dating someone in Denmark at that time, someone kind, patient, and genuinely caring. You would think love is enough, right? But when pain becomes daily and communication becomes a battlefield, even love can start losing oxygen. There's a strange heaviness when you're lying next to someone who wants to help you but doesn't fully understand your words, your culture, or the invisible meanings hidden between your breaths. Love is powerful, but miscommunication is a silent earthquake. It shakes without making a sound. One night, when my fever was rising again, I tried to explain what I was feeling. My thoughts were clear, but my English was tired, trembling, and incomplete. I said something like, "My inside feels pressure, like someone pushing from here," while pointing to my ribs. It sounded childish. He looked confused, not because he didn't care, but because the language bridge between us was missing bricks. Studies on intercultural relationships say that miscommunication during emotionally intense situations creates perceived emotional distance, even when love is present. And that night I could feel the distance forming like ice between two warm hands. He kept asking, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I kept replying, "I don't know." And that's when the worst question showed up in my mind. If I cannot communicate my pain, do I still deserve to be cared for? That question is poison. It turns love into a test you fear failing. I felt like I was slowly disappearing from my own relationship, not because he didn't love me, but because I could not express myself clearly enough to stay emotionally visible. There's also a psychological phenomenon called language-based identity shrinking, where limited vocabulary makes you feel smaller than you actually are. Without your native language, you lose your humor, your depth, your emotional precision. You become a lighter version of yourself, almost like a sketch instead of a painting. And during sickness, that sketch feels even thinner, almost like someone could erase you just by misunderstanding one sentence. I remember seeing the worry in his eyes, and instead of feeling comforted, I felt guilty. Guilty that my English wasn't enough, guilty that my pain was becoming his stress, guilty that I couldn't be simple to love in a foreign country. But the truth is, love is not about perfection. It's about staying when things stop being easy. Still, in that moment, isolation felt louder than affection. Sometimes love doesn't break because there's no love. It breaks because the words needed to protect it arrived too late. Psychology of fear. Strange thing about the human brain. It can memorize song lyrics from 10 years ago. But the moment you need to say a simple sentence like, "I need help," it suddenly acts like English was never installed in your system. Psychologists call this threat-induced cognitive silencing, but I call it the moment your confidence packs its bags and leaves you alone with fear. When you're sick abroad, fear doesn't scream. It whispers in slow, poisonous sentences like, "What if you say it wrong?" Or, "What if they don't understand you?" Fear doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to sound realistic. Imagine your brain like a computer with too many tabs open. Pain, fever, homesickness, embarrassment, confusion, loneliness, and then you press the Speak English button. It doesn't load, it crashes. The amygdala, your fear center, goes into overdrive and basically tells your language center, "Shut up, survival only." That's why even people with high English skills suddenly talk like broken robots under stress. It's not stupidity, it's biology. Your brain chooses survival mode, and apparently it thinks silence is safer than humiliation. You know what's even more twisted? The brain hates uncertainty more than physical pain. Studies show that uncertainty activates the same neural pathways as pain, meaning when you don't know how to say something correctly, your brain reacts as if you're physically hurt. So every forgotten word, every wrong pronunciation feels like a tiny electric shock inside your skull. No wonder your tongue suddenly becomes heavy like it belongs to someone else. And fear has another cruel superpower, memory distortion. When you remember past speaking failures, like when someone laughed or corrected you, or didn't understand, your brain stores it not as a memory, but as a warning sign. Never let this happen again. Your subconscious doesn't care if the situation was harmless. It marks it as danger. So the next time you try to speak English while stressed, your brain throws emotional flashbacks like warning pop-up ads. Don't embarrass yourself. Stay quiet. It becomes a psychological prison built with tiny, harmless moments that grow into invisible walls. But here's the healing part. Fear is not proof that you're weak, fear is proof that your brain cares about you staying safe. It just doesn't understand that speaking imperfect English will not kill you. Fear is protective, not destructive, until you let it become your only guide. The moment you understand fear is a misfired survival instinct, not a personal failure, you can stop fighting yourself and start guiding your own nervous system like a gentle, patient coach. Language fluency isn't about vocabulary size. It's about emotional safety. When your brain feels safe, your words return like birds that always knew their way home. Micro-Victories Plan. Here's the twist no textbook ever teaches. You don't rebuild your English by trying to become fluent. You rebuild it by creating tiny, safe wins that convince your nervous system you're not in danger anymore. Healing your language is the same as healing your body after sickness. Slowly, gently, consistently, without shame. I created what I now call the 3-3-3 Micro-Victories method. Not because it sounded cool, but because my brain refused anything bigger. The rule was simple. 3 minutes, 3 sentences, 3 repetitions, no perfection, no pressure, no audience, no judgment. I chose slow English like someone learning to breathe again after drowning. And trust me, sometimes slow English feels like medicine. Fast English feels like poison. First, I recorded myself speaking 3 short sentences every morning. Not complicated ones, just real ones. I don't feel well today. My chest feels tight. I need help. These weren't Instagram aesthetic affirmations. They were survival sentences. Why? Because the brain remembers phrases connected to emotion 40% faster than neutral information. So instead of memorizing random textbook lines like "the boy is under the tree," I practiced language with personal emotional utility, the kind your body might actually need in real life. Then came the listening stage. I played slow English audio, not motivational speeches or TED Talks, but simple natural speech at a comfortable rhythm. Neuroscience shows that slow and clear language reduces amygdala activation, meaning your fear center calms down enough for you to learn. I didn't care about accents, fancy vocabulary, or sounding native. I just wanted safety and clarity. Learning does not happen when the brain is terrified. It happens when the nervous system feels protected. For reading, I didn't touch fiction or study books. I chose real-life text. Medicine labels, clinic instructions, hospital websites, appointment emails, insurance guidelines. Some people judge this as boring, but when you're sick, practical English is more valuable than poetic English. Every time I decoded a sentence correctly, I whispered to myself, "See? You're not helpless." Confidence grows fastest in environments that used to scare you. Train speaking under calm conditions. I practice whisper shadowing. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quietly repeating what I heard, like teaching my tongue to trust English again. Whispering reduces performance stress, and repetition builds neural efficiency. Slowly my voice returned, not because I forced it, but because I made English feel safe again. The goal was never fluency. The goal was visibility, to never disappear again behind silence. And the funny thing about micro-victories is that after a few weeks, they compound like tiny drops turning into a river. The day you stop chasing perfection, English finally has space to come home to you. The breakthrough scene. Healing never arrives with fireworks. It slips in quietly, like sunlight that doesn't ask permission. My breakthrough didn't happen in a classroom or watching a fancy English learning video. It happened in the most ordinary Danish clinic, where my voice finally chose to stay instead of shaking. I remember sitting in that small white waiting room, holding a form I could barely understand, with my heart beating like it was trying to escape my ribs. But something felt different. Not less scary, just less unbearable. I whispered to myself, 3 sentences. You only need 3. My voice didn't sound strong, but it sounded real. When the nurse called my name, I walked in with fear still inside me, but for the first time, fear walked behind me, not in front. She asked gently, "Can you tell me what you're feeling?" And instead of freezing, buffering, or becoming a statue with working Wi-Fi but no words, I used my microscript. My chest feels tight. It's hard to breathe when I lie down. It gets worse at night. Not perfect, not poetic, but clear. And clarity is the real language of survival. Her eyes softened instantly. She understood. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel stupid, dramatic, or burdensome. I felt human again. What people don't know is that understanding is the most powerful medicine someone can give you. When she nodded and took notes, my nervous system finally exhaled. The appointment continued in simple English, slow, kind, and safe, like both of us were helping my voice learn how to stand again. That day, I realized something psychologists describe as self-efficacy restoration, where one successful experience rewires your belief in your own capability. It's crazy how one tiny moment can delete months of internal war. Later that evening, I texted the person I loved, not with emojis or vague expressions, but with full, clear sentences. We talked softly, slowly, honestly, like two people choosing to build a bridge brick by brick, rather than pretending confusion didn't hurt. The emotional distance didn't disappear instantly, but that night connection returned, not perfect but alive. And you know what's wild? After that clinic visit, English didn't feel like a mountain anymore, it felt like a staircase. Still long, still tiring, but possible. Breakthroughs don't mean, I am fluent now. Breakthroughs mean, I am no longer afraid to try. Sometimes the victory isn't that you spoke perfectly. It's that you didn't disappear. Meaning of vows. There's a sentence people love to romanticize. In sickness and in health. It sounds poetic in wedding vows, printed on Pinterest boards, or written inside greeting cards. But when you live it, especially far from home with a foreign language between your pain and someone's understanding, that sentence becomes heavier than your own body weight. I learned that sickness is not just a test of love, but a test of communication, patience, and emotional literacy. People think love is measured by how tightly someone holds you, but sometimes it's measured by how long they stay when your words are broken and your fear doesn't speak clean English. Being sick abroad taught me that those vows have invisible footnotes. They don't only mean staying when the body hurts. They mean staying when communication hurts, when misunderstandings multiply, when questions sound like accusations, when silence feels like abandonment even though both hearts care. Love in your native language is a conversation. Love in a foreign language is translation, and translation is tiring, especially when fear edits every sentence. I once believed that to be loved in another country, I had to be easy. Easy to understand, easy to comfort, easy to communicate with. But truth is, real love isn't proven by perfection. It's proven by continued presence. Psychology calls this secure emotional attachment under adversity, where love becomes a steady anchor rather than a conditional reward. So, does in sickness and in health have a limit? Maybe it does. Not a limit of love, but a limit of emotional stamina and communication skill. And that's not tragic, it's human. Relationships don't fail because people are heartless. Sometimes they fail because there are not enough shared words to carry shared pain. But here is the healing part. Love is not only what someone gives you. Love is also what you learn to give yourself: clarity, patience, voice, courage. When you strengthen your communication, you don't just improve English. You increase the emotional oxygen inside your relationships. Maybe vows aren't promises of perfection. Maybe they are invitations to grow, breathe, and translate life together, slowly, kindly, without shame. Final reflection and call. Looking back, I realized that my journey through sickness, love, and broken English in Denmark was less about fluency and more about survival, presence, and courage. I could have given up countless times, given up on speaking, given up on love, given up on myself. But every small step, every micro-victory, every whispered sentence rebuilt not only my language but also my belief that I deserve to be heard, seen, and cared for. There is a strange beauty in learning slowly. Each word becomes a bridge, Each sentence a lifeline. I want you to understand this. Fear, illness, and language barriers are not permanent prisons. They are signals, your nervous system's way of saying, "Careful, this is important." When I stopped fighting fear and started using it as a guide, I discovered that English could be gentle, that love could survive imperfection, and that even in the darkest moments, tiny actions create momentum. It doesn't require heroic effort. Sometimes speaking 3 sentences clearly, listening with intention, or reading a few words that matter can change everything. What I hope you take from this story is not a lesson in grammar or pronunciation, but a lesson in persistence, compassion, and self-trust. If you are feeling stuck, isolated, or exhausted in your English learning, or in life, remember, progress doesn't have to be fast to be real. Start small. Start kind. Start now. Even a whisper repeated daily can become a voice that carries you through fear, sickness, and doubt. And finally, consider this. In sickness and in health isn't just a vow to others, it's a vow to yourself. Stay present. Speak your truth. Love with clarity. And slowly, carefully, you will build not only fluency but also resilience, connection, and hope.